Welcome to another mega exciting weekly kingscrusher radio show. So the time is around 9 UK time on a Tuesday, and I thought this week we could check out some more notable games on Viktor Korchnoi. Pardon me, that was a little unintended bit of music there, which okay, so let me see. So we're going to be looking in particular at Viktor Korchnoi against Mikhail Tal. Now, Mikhail Tal had the reputation of one of the most feared attacking players of all time, and he had a penetrating stare to match which could put off many opponents. In fact, I think some resorted to wearing sunglasses to avoid Tal's stare. But Korchnoi has a reputation of being a fierce, not just defender, but counter-attacker, provoking imbalances in the position and being able to survive attacks to see his own advantages come through at the end. So I think these are very, very interesting encounters to go through to extend our knowledge of Viktor Korchnoi and his notable games. He had a very, very strong plus record against Mikhail Tal. Devastatingly strong. It was in fact 13-4 with 27 draws in between. So that was on the classical game encounters. Let's have a look at one of the first encounters between them in Riga 1955. So Mikhail Tal played e4. So this is 5 years before Tal became world champion in the 1960 match, which he defeated Mikhail Bobby. So 5 years before. e5 from Viktor Korchnoi. Let's put on a vตั๋iktər actually, just to check out the tactics especially. And okay, we have Roy Lopez, classic Roy Lopez. And here Korchnoi elects for an open Roy Lopez, and actually he played this a few times against Mikhail Tal, this open variation. It's one of the more popular moves. It's the third most popular move according to Livebook to play this line. We have d4, b5, bishop b3, pretty standard, d5, because otherwise white, by the way, is threatening. Well, it's just theory to play d5. Let's leave it at that. D takes e5, bishop e6, yeah, protecting d5. c3, which give the bishop escape just in case knight a5. Bishop e7, pretty standard stuff, all pretty standard. Now here usually knight c5 is played. That's the main kind of move, it seems, in Livebook. But Viktor just takes on d2 here, and now we see knight a5, bishop goes to c2, c5, and there's the stare of the Tal bishops to the king side. But are they doing anything here? Is Tal going to be able to whip up an attack? Because actually on the queen side it looks as though black might be advancing soon, and he's also got things like knight c4 hitting b2. Queen d3 threatens crudely a mate in 1, so that's parried. But now, you know, at the cost of some dark square weaknesses, they're tapped into with bishop h6. But now, yeah, what is happening here? Queen d2 is played, and that looks a little bit on the optimistic side. Engine suggestion here: take it easy, not try too hard. Maybe play even on the queen side of a4, or even just queen e2. But yeah, Tal's move is maybe a tad, tiny bit like optimistic. The queen coming here is propelled to go to an attacking square, and then maybe try and, you know, break down the king or something like this at some point. But isn't it at the cost of a pawn, potentially? I mean, knight c4 is played here. The queen's not going to step back to c1. That's not the plan. If the queen stepped back now, this is quite committal, then bishop g4 is actually good for black. What does white do here? e5 is weak as well. This is terribly weak, this pawn here. So this is like very committal to a bad position if queen c1. So that's not the idea. The idea is queen f4 and sack a pawn. Tal's got his reputation to uphold as well. He can't go protecting little pawns on the queen side. That's not what attacking players do. But does anyone dare actually take these pawns? Well, Korchnoi does dare. He does take the pawn. So the question to you guys, just to see if anyone's awake, is do you think white has enough compensation here? I'm typing the question. If I give you 20 seconds to think about it, does white have enough compensation for that little b pawn? What do you think? Any ideas? Should black be able to hold this position on the king side and be material up? What do you think? Okay, let's have a look at the game. Well, the first thing Tal does is trying to weaken the dark squares. Bishop g5, he's trying to swap off the dark squares so maybe he can install the queen on h6 or something. But there's an energetic reply actually here in response to this. Just d4. And all of a sudden actually the knight might be useful for d3 on b2, ridiculously. So there's a kind of almost like pedantic consideration that the knight on b2 is pedantically supporting d3. I mean, obviously it's stopping any rook d1 as well. So it's disruptive because white can't do anything about this pawn because there's bishop g5. He's going to end up losing a piece if he's not careful. But is it going to distract from his attack if he tries to carefully win a pawn? He plays takes, and we have now c takes d4, although it seems the engine thinks bishop d5 is interesting as well here, and black's apparently better, doing quite well. But let's go with Viktor Korchnoi's move. C takes d4. This is still okay for black, very nice for black. There's a threat of d3 in this position. We have bishop e4 now. If bishop takes e7, queen takes e7, and although white has got the pawn back, this position here, there's still an uneasiness about this potentially weak pawn, but also black's doing well now on the queen side, and this is not a Tal-like position anymore. There's no real attacking prospects, it seems, and black's going to have a nice knight coming to c4. So Tal wanted to avoid this, and he wants to make sure he's got some attacking potential. He plays bishop e4. Now we have bishop d5, bishop takes, queen takes, bishop takes, rook takes, and the first sign of some threats brewing. Queen h4 hits the rook and supports knight g5, hitting h7. But is this all a bit too crude? Is it easy to defend this? Or maybe it's not. Korchnoi supports his rook. Then we have knight g5. That's mate in one threat, or two, is stopped. But knight e4 isn't as dangerous going into f6. The other thing about this f6 is winning the queen in this particular configuration. It will be a check. So in fact, here the pedantics of the material winning earlier, are they being punished? Well, actually, we see an exchange sack. Queen takes e5, just allowing this check here, because black has got already 2 pawns for the exchange. This position, white's attack, has been extinguished at the moment. It's now really extinguished. It's only the lone queen all by itself with no support. Where's the support for the attack? Black's got this passed pawn. In fact, black wants the exchange of queens now. We see d3 protecting the knight now. And this pawn is actually really dangerous. It's just ready to be pushed there. It's actually the knight still supporting that d1 square. White starts to collapse here after check. Knight c4, lifting the blockade. And now this is just really crushing d2. And here, Mikhail Tal, he had to resign. He had to resign here. Let's see if he played on, say rook e2, check. This position here, knight b2, lifting the blockade again, and winning a whole rook. Because we're going to queen, we're going to pin that queen there. We're going to be a whole rook or more up soon, crushing. Well, a knight up anyway. Or was it even worse? Let's have a look. Check. And here there's actually knight d3. That's pretty crushing. So if takes, there's knight f2. Yeah, it's all over anyway. The final position is just playing out. It's over. It's going to be over. So anyway, that didn't happen. It just ended here on d2. End of game. Now I'm not saying that you're going to win games with defending, but there's an element of spice. It's not about that with Viktor Korchnoi. I think that's a misconception. It's not that he's a brilliant defender, and I hope people don't say that. He's a brilliant counter-attacker. He's created imbalances in the position, and he's installed certain advantages. He's wiped out the attack, and then he's built on those earlier advantages. That's what seemed to really happen in this game. What do you guys think? It's more than the act of defense. He installed certain advantages before that, and he went back to them after. And let's see if this pattern repeats in some other games. So I hope you got that from this game. That's kind of what I get from this game. I think there is a certain art and satisfaction in playing like this. The counter-attacker is definitely stirring up things in the position. Okay, so let's see another encounter of theirs. So in 1958, Tal again was white against Korchnoi. Now, in this game, Tal is playing against the French defense. Korchnoi chooses the French defense as a weapon of choice. We see d4, d5, knight c3, the winner variation, bishop b4, e5, c5. Yeah, white incurs some structural damage, but gets that bishop pair. We see knight e7. Now in live book, yeah, this is the main move, queen g4, just going for that g7. And there's a few choices for black here. There's numerous choices that have been tried, even castling. Queen c7, king f8, protecting g7. C takes d4. This has been tried. This has been tried. Quite a few actually. But knight f5, this is like about the 5th most popular idea. Knight f5 does protect g7. Okay, bishop d3 now is played. Okay, bishop d3, we have h5. And usually the queen goes to f4 here. In this game, actually, it went a little less centralized actually. Mikhail Tal played queen h3. It seems he's got ideas of g4 maybe in particular in this game. He's pinning that h pawn clearly. But queen f4, just to show you, this is often played. For example, here, knight e2, knight e7. This has been played before quite a bit, and it's thought to be okay for black. Okay, but here we see this maybe an odder queen h3. C takes d4, knight f3, queen c7. So it's threatening queen takes c3 check. The rook moves out of the way. Now queen takes c3 might not be desirable here because bishop d2 and white can get on with things. So in fact we see d takes undoubling the pawns. But now, yeah, the point of queen h3 is to use maybe this pin. That g4 is using that pin now. The knight goes to e7. And this is actually quite good though for black, this position. G takes h5. Because it seems, again, a totally different opening, but it seems as though white's e-pawn is actually quite vulnerable in this position. You might not think so, because surely it can be supported with bishop f4, right? Well, we see knight bc6. It's supported with bishop f4, but guess what resource black has here, which actually shows black's position is pretty good. It's more than just good. Black has a great resource in this position. So black to play, what would you play in this position? Can you see? It seems as though, I mean, if we just took these two games that I'm just showing you, I mean, it seems as though, why is Tal getting a slightly weak e-pawn? Is this some weird symptom of trying to get an attacking position that he ends up having a slightly weak e-pawn? But it's proven here, knight g6, using the pin, hitting f4. White really doesn't want to give up his light square bishop. He doesn't want to do this. Yeah, this position here is okay for black. There's going to be no attack there. So Tal has to give up his e-pawn, but you might think, okay, there's going to be some compensation here. He gives up the e-pawn, pressing knight takes f3 now. Knight takes, knight takes. Still looks like a scary pin, right? If white castles, white didn't castle. If white castles, you know, bishop d7, that should be okay as well. But white played king f1. Now bishop d7. Black might be casting queenside now and laughing. Tal stops that with queen h4. You're not laughing now, are you? King still in the center. Nasty pin, right? Well, f6. Now again, black could be casting queenside. That stopped again. Bishop takes e5. Now here also there's bishop g6 on the cards as well. We have queen takes. Bishop g6 isn't used in this position. There's also this rook takes b7. That's the one that's used. On bishop g6 check, king e7, this connects to rooks. This position here is nice for black. It's just nice. So we have this rook takes b7. But white's pawns are pretty fragmented here. If you look, how many pawn islands has he got? He's got a dramatic amount of pawn islands. Double pawns, isolated pawn, isolated, isolated. And we have rook b8 challenging this rook, when it probably was threatening something naughty. Not yet, nearly, but anyway, it's challenged. Let's try and go around here. So it's taken, queen takes. Where's the attack? Again, the queen is nearly on its own. It's nearly as bad as the other game where the queen is left on its own. You know, if you look at the most amazing Tal games, the queen's got support. But, you know, against Korchnoi, it seems Korchnoi is getting these positions where he's taking out a lot of the sting of the attack. And this is the thing, the queen's just virtually on its own here. The pawn structure is wrecked. You might think, well, the g-file? The g-file, is that going to come to white's rescue? We see queen g4, king f8, and some support finally with rook g1. Actually, this king f8 might have, yeah, okay, let's go with king f8. So rook g1, and it looks maybe like a little bit dangerous because, you know, if we try and defend, then there's things like h6. You don't want too much mobility for the attacking player's pawns. So in fact, the whole g-file and this mobility is shut down with one move. Can you see what black plays in this position? You want to shut down mobility and dynamic play and coordination. What do you do here with black to try and defend this position? You want to extinguish the attack. You want to leave yourself with the trump card of the more mobile pawn center, but you want to shut down this g-file stuff. So black to play. What would you play here with black? Any ideas? g5, yeah, sack a pawn. It's the en passant, but now blockade. So the king is blockading the pawn. Equal on pawns, but black has a better pawn structure. We have h4, a5, rook g3, check, and now queen b7, threatening d4 check and to get this diagonal. h5, check, bishop c6. Black is being more than just a nuisance here, because after queen d5, that's a nice central place for the queen, threatening this pawn now. Queen f4, trying to get behind here for some sort of attack. There's also ideas of the check as well now. First, maybe. But the key thing is to stop the lines with queen c7 check. Just to show that queen c7 is the critical issue. But you would first, I think, ideally play this check. It's actually a forced mate in 8 if this happened, because you got the check, and that's kind of lethal. Yeah, winning with the pawn, but it's shut down again. Black to play though can shut this down just in time with queen e5. Again, a bit optimistic here. Tal should like accept this is not happening, right? And just play queen f3. And according to engines, this is actually equal, because say you have queen d5, you can just repeat with queen f4. Now I'm not sure what the tournament situation was actually. Maybe Tal was definitely trying to win this for some tournament scenario, possibly, but he played actually trying for the win instead with h6 check. This just does not work. It's just a humongous blunder. He's just blundering away his whole position. maybe also there's this slight element of irritation playing against Korchnoi, who has got a plus record against them, and he wants to try and win. He plays this h6 move. So the idea is to play now. It's a neat idea if it works. Can you guess what the idea was for white here? White to play. It's a fun idea if it can work, but unfortunately it doesn't work in this position. Guess what white's idea was? Can you see? The idea was to try and queen the pawn with queen takes. G7. And black refutes this. Guess how? Black plays what? Which causes white to resign. How do you stop this pawn? Come on. How do you stop the pawn? Yeah, just take here. Check. Oh dear. This is a very inglorious way to lose. Oh, from an equal position. it's just totally lost here now. This position, obviously. Oh dear, oh dear. Yeah, it seems technically, I mean seriously, the engine thought this was equal here after queen f3, because I think white's keeping up the threats. White's threatening not a8, white's threatening queen b7. So as long as white keeps up the threats, we have this perpetual situation. So we're either threatening b7 or c7, right? If black tries to do something else, what does black try and do here? He plays this. Check. That's lethal. Because actually I think we've got h1, guys. I think we've got h1 here, if nothing else. But even this, like g7, we've got the bleeding h1 square, pardon the French. So if we try and block this pawn here, I think it's end of game with queen h1 check, or just mating like this as a mate in 3, which is why white had a draw here. He didn't need to blow his position. Although he's lost structurally and everything, the pawns do a good job if you can get around the side doors, side entrance. But yeah, you just repeat here. You just repeat queen f3. How do we defend this? How do we defend this if it's not with queen d5? Queen d5, there's queen b5, but then we just repeat again, queen f4. And now, okay, things get a little bit interesting. You know, oh no, it might have come back. No, I think it's definitely gone. Let me see. Oh dear. The internet okay? I said hi all on stream. Is there still life on stream? Well, that was a good point for it to break down anyway, because it means I think it means I can just come out and start again this on a play chess. I'm going to try and come out and go back in. And our next game will be past 1958. So what's our next game? 1959. Tal against Korchnoi in 1959. 1959. There's a stream gone black. Hold on a sec. Need to make sure it's not. It thinks it's a new window. Might need to restore that. Hold on. Okay, so this is again a USSR championship, 1959. And is the stream back? It's not yet back, is it? Board's gone, hasn't it? The board's gone. Yeah. Oh dear. How was this one sorted? Board? You got a board, have you? It's all fine. Alright, we'll carry on. Although I can't see it on my preview, but anyway. What I can do, and I'll just try and get it back on my preview just for state of mind. Let's flip back and forward. Okay, I've got the chessboard now. Great. Alright, carrying on. E4 from Mikhail Tal. So this is USSR Championship 1959. C5. Now, Korchnoi is being really provocative, playing Sicilian defense. Change of opening. Knight F3, D6. Open Sicilian. A6. Bishop G5, Bishop C4. Quite often here Queen B6 is played, but here Korchnoi plays Queen A5, Queen D2. The threat is actually what is the threat? You might be wondering. Well, there's numerous. The bishop's attacked, and there's also knight takes E4, but both are addressed with Queen D2. E6. White castled here on the king side. Quite often Bishop B3 is being played here, but Tal castled king side. H6, Bishop H4, Bishop E7. And there's a threat here of knight takes E4, by the way, to hit H4, hitting the queen. Rook AD1, protecting the queen. Now I don't think knight takes E4 works. Knight takes, kicking the queen, queen takes. This position is not good for black. Here, this is horrible actually. If King F8, this is like a massacre because there's knight 4 to F5 check. Winning that bishop, that would be a massacre. And there's also, this is funny stuff is going on here actually. If King F8, White's got a crushing move in this line as well. This is just a variation. White's got bishop takes E6. This is a massacre as well. Check. And here knight takes C8. It's just, it'll be rubble. Black's position will be reduced to rubble. So it's not a good idea to play knight takes E4 in this position anymore. We see knight E5. bishop b3, g5, knight h5. It looks as though, yeah, is this okay for black? It's much more solid than what we've just seen. Check, b5, taking on e5 here. Now knight c6 hits the queen. Whoa. Knight c6 hits the queen, and potentially also there's this there's pressure on the d file. The queen hasn't got too many squares. It has to come back on this diagonal. It comes here. Knight takes. King takes. Bishop b3, and maybe annoyingly for Mikhail Tal, nothing's really that clear here for white's attacking prospects. Black starts to build up a bit of pressure on e4, and now, yeah, it looks as though this position is starting to look quite okay for black. Plays bishop a6 here, not wanting this pawn. This looks a bit scary, but it plays actually bishop a6, takes on c3, rotates, get the queen, try and get the queens off. Tal actually obliges here. I mean, in quite a lot of the crushes of Tal games, he's got the queens on. He obliges, and actually, yeah, so black has succeeded in using the Sicilian defense to reach just a nice position, which seems to be quite safe. Even though the king's in the center, these pawns are controlling a lot of key squares. Black's pieces seem very nice. We have a check. Bishop b7. Check. One pair of rooks comes off. Okay, so here, obviously white wants to play rook d7, it seems, or knight takes. But we have bishop takes. Black's pawn up. b4. That's just taken. Isn't this dangerous though? Is there something dangerous about this? Bishop b7, knight d3, e4, knight e5. There is a threat of knight c4 at least. Where's that rook going? So in advance, the rook is given d6 with this move bishop d5. It gives the rook, well, and it stops. I mean, you can take as well, but the rook's also got d6 as well. Not that it needs it there. Bishop d5, basically the bishop's threatening to snap off this knight. Rook b1, rook b8, and yeah, it's a bit of a grind here actually. Black is like a pawn up, and he just needs to somehow consolidate. The pieces are kicked back. Black infiltrates now. Now this is a very nice move because it relies on king d6. If taking, yeah, just king d6, because there's also this back row issue as well. So we see check instead, king d6, knight h8. It seems a bit weird to put a knight on at h8. It seems a bit anti-positional, but the idea is to harass the king and protecting the knight. e5 stops all that nonsense because the bishop's like covering f7. Now there's more nonsense with bishop c4 potentially, but unpin, king e6. Where's the attack? Bishop h5. Okay, another threat, maybe, possibly. King f6, holding f7. This knight's just really dumb on h8. It has to be said. Without any bias to Mikhail Tal, this is really bad. And this is a year before Tal became world champion. You see, against certain players, he wasn't getting the attacking positions that really he could really work with. This is not really a great position to work with if you're an attacking player. But anyway, bishop f7, took. Yep, we go into rook and pawn ending, which black is just much better. Threatening mate in 1. Black's a pawn up, threatening, well, doesn't have to threaten anything, it's just a pawn up. Check. Here. G4, now threatening check. And e4 check, if the king went there. And here actually, Tal, he resigned. Now this is really bad, this position, because if rook a5, then check, check, and we're going to take on f2. And this is just easily winning for black. This position here, 2 connected passed pawns. Yeah. So these are Tal games you wouldn't have seen on YouTube. it's just, but you see, it's a good time to show these games because Korchnoi was a great player and his counter-attacking games haven't been emphasized that much. There's too much of a bias for attacking players, it seems, on the likes of YouTube. You know, everyone likes attacking, but you know, the art of counter-attack and defense and just extinguishing attacks, that's really useful skills as well. And people, you know, often say of me that I throw away pawns, and it's true. You know, if you throw away pawns, the thing is you can get away with it quite a lot of the time if you play blitz chess, because you can just still win on time. So you know, the end games are not really that painful, but in a long game, yeah, the pawns are more valuable. But Tal was building his reputation as a fierce attacking player. Just certain defensive attacking, certain players relished just grabbing material and counter-attacking later, and Korchnoi was one of them. So should we let's move on to another example. We're building up a picture here. And this is 1962, so by this time I think Tal had lost his crown to Botvinnik again. So Botvinnik was back as world champion in 1962. I mean, what do we do? I mean, we all want to be attacking players, but what do you want to do? Do you want to brush away the downsides of being an attacking player? There are downsides. You can lose material, you can lose the games, you can be ground down in the end. The attacks can fall flat on their face. Your queen can be left with no support. And that happens to the likes of Tal, so it's not just you, you know, this happens. It's the facts of life if you're an attacking player, because sometimes, you know, you're trying to get like an aggressive pawn chain, you know, sometimes those pawns are weak. It just happens. So anyway, so Korchnoi against Tal in 1962. This is the Curaçao, I think it's pronounced Curaçao actually, candidates of 1962. I think I looked up the pronunciation of that. I think it's Curaçao. Curaçao, if someone wants to correct me. Okay, fine, but otherwise, okay, Korchnoi was playing white here. We're going in decisive game order, so I'm not saying that Korchnoi is winning all of these games. What I'm doing here is going in decisive game order. Okay. So I'm not telling you the result of the game in advance, but you know the score was lopsided. You do know the score was lopsided. So Korchnoi with white. So c4, knight f6, knight c3, e6. So Tal playing black plays this. As this is aggressive opening of choice, this Tarrasch, it's known to try and give an active game. And I'm careful with the words there, because actually the same words were used as a sort of put down for Nesmetanov, who some players said if you didn't give Nezmetinov an active game, you know, don't give him an active game because he could kill anyone. But they were winning against the likes of Nezmetinov by making sure they didn't have an active game. The attacking player needs an active game quite often. This terrace defense ticks that box a little bit. C takes D, knight takes D5. But here white's still trying to play solidly. Okay, bishop D3. In fact, white is the one with the isolated pawn. So Korchnoi is playing with the isolated queen's pawn. Bishop G5, bishop B7. Bishop takes F6. Bishop E4. In fact, Korchnoi seems to be in an attacking position here after D5. It seems a bit scary for black. But it turns out in this position, Rook D8 is sufficient, actually. Rook D8 is sufficient here. Because if taking can take, and you just win the bishop on E4, so Rook D8 is good. Queen C2 is played. Bishop takes. Here, Queen B7. And it turns out Korchnoi is the one to pawn down in this game at the moment. For a change. Check. Okay, Queen A5. Black castles. Knight E5. It does seem to threaten things like Rook D7, but that's not such a big deal. Rook C8, the back row is a bit weak here. White makes some air for the king. Queen B6. Yeah, still a pawn up for black. Check. Still a pawn up for black. And yeah, it's not a very interesting position though. It's not a spectator friendly position. So I'm going to just go through the moves here. It's a bit of a grind. Black's a pawn up, right? And that bishop is quite nice here as well. It's almost dominating the knight. King's trying to come in. Pass pawn is on its way. The 3-2 pawn majority. G4, that knight's getting crushed here. Yeah, the pass pawn's on its way. And after bishop G3, F2, in fact, Korchnoi loses. Korchnoi loses this game. Yeah, Korchnoi was ground down by Tal, who was a pawn up from the opening. It was just ground down. Not a spectacular game, but you know, yeah, this is what happened. All right, let's take the next one. Okay. I've got a few more to have a look at. Now this is in oh God, am I not getting it in year order? Pardon me. So this game was 1962. And the same year. Yeah, but the thing is, this game I've shown on the YouTube channel, Benoni game. I'm going to skip this Benoni game. There was a Benoni game which is on the YouTube channel just recently, which was in the USSR Championship 1962. We're going to skip past that to the 1962 Curaçao candidates. Right, so Tal was playing white here. Let's have Tal with white. Korchnoi with black. We have e4, e5. So 1962 Curaçao candidates. Willemstad. Okay, we have that Roy Lopez, repeat of the open variation of the Roy Lopez, because knight takes e4 is played here. Slightly curious tendency, or is it, for Korchnoi to choose the open variation? Does anyone know why? I'm open for a bit of trivia why Korchnoi is choosing this line in Roy Lopez. I mean, it's interesting. If you want to let me know. Okay, so d4, if anyone knows. b5, I mean, it's a solid line though. Okay, white does end up with a slightly vulnerable e5 pawn quite a bit of the time, so it looks like a repeat of a previous example we've seen up to a point. Queen d7 is played here, not like taking on d2. I think we saw taking on d2 before, but queen d7 is more, actually it's more usual. White is not keen to take on e4 here. That's thought to be equal. If white takes on e4, it's kind of, that pawn's weak as well, that e5 pawn. This is just okay for black, because that pawn's weak. Although there is knight g5 hitting, get this position. It's no big deal. So it's not usually taken. Okay, so we have knight d4 instead by Mikhail Tal. This move knight d4 is rare though. Usually rook e1 is played here, or bishop c2, or h3. So this is actually quite rare. That was, knight d4 is a rare bird. And it is giving up that e5 pawn. It's just giving it up actually. Knight takes d2, hitting the rook. He gives up the e5 pawn. This is not the first time I've seen this idea though. I'm pretty sure there's an Adam Summerskull game, I'm pretty sure, had this pawn sack. White's idea is to play like f4, f5. So f4 with tempo, knight c4. Bishop takes in. It looks scary. It does look scary after f5. White's really going for it. This is really aggressive. Tal, yeah, he's had enough of this Korchnoi. He's going for it, yeah. f6. Korchnoi takes that. Rook takes f6. I think this is like burning the bridges attack. So does this actually work? This kind of attack, does it really work? Okay, so g takes f6. What's the idea here? It's a little surprising move actually. White's next move is quite surprising. If I ask you White to play, what would be a good attacking move attempt? So what is Tal's idea here, you think, in this position? It's actually quite fascinating. White play. Can you see what White can play? Anything that's dangerous that you can think of? Any guesses? Alright, I'm going to show you. Alright, bishop g5. So threatening to take. If this is playing into white's hands, check, knight f5, and you'll start regretting this. There's a big regret here. You have to give up the queen. So that's a no-go area. No, instead queen g4 was played though. Okay, bishop takes. And now c5, kicking that knight back. It's not going to f5. It's going back. Queen g6. Bishop's driven back, or is it protected? It's protected. Pardon me. Bishop e4 on the knight. This one, threatening to evict the bishop soon. Bishop's evicted, or is it protected? It's protected. But h5, right here. Queen g3. White's queen is of course tied down, can't go anywhere because of g2. Queen f2, yeah, the exchange of queens is pretty sad, because actually, you know, black's like the exchange up. But black is also threatening here, threatening to take on e5. So what is actually white doing in this position? Let's just think about this position. What is white doing here? If white plays, say, knight d7, then rook d6, bang. That's not nice. So yeah, e5 is actually loose here. It's loose. Though we have this meek exchange of queens, the exchange down. e5 is still targeted. Exchange down. Now exchange of rooks, the exchange down. It doesn't change the story. White's just the exchange down. So Tal didn't need to play against computers like we have today. He could just play against Korchnoi and he'd simulate playing like a computer. Korchnoi would just grab the material, refute the attack, and just win later. And here white just resigned because there's a passed pawn on the way. Oh dear. Oh boy. Yeah, it's an annoying variation as well. This is the second time Korchnoi scored with this open variation of the royal pairs. It's getting to be an annoying variation to tell, surely, at this point. Now it's 10 past 10. Should we, I don't know, more or next week? Who's had enough? If you want to do a quick vote. I think I might have looked at one or two more games. Don't know. I might have. But we can carry on next week to be on the safe side. So this was 1962 Curaçao candidates. Yeah, I think I'd rather carry on next week anyway. Okay, so yeah, just to make sure I'm prepared. Alright, so I hope you got something from these games, and yeah, I think I'll prepare more thoroughly if yeah, we carry on next week. So yeah, thanks for coming, yeah, and yeah, I'll see you next week, and we'll carry on this to see the other encounters, decisive encounters. I think it is fascinating to check, you know, because it's representing, you know, attacking player against the counter-attacking player. Okay, and remember to like the video if you got anything from it. Okay, yeah, see you next week. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks.